Welcome back to Horror and Cats. I'm Smokey Lyle, and this week I've played Choo Choo Charles, finally. The long-awaited, weird Thomas the Tank Engine kind of open-world horror game where you acquire and fix up a train that goes around this island that's currently, I'd say, haunted by is an okay way to phrase it. I'm sure there's a better one, though. By this train engine with a humanoid demonic face like Thomas the Tank Engine, but also these huge, creepy spider legs. So obviously it doesn't have to stick to the track, but you do. Over the course of the game, you do side missions for people on the island. You do primary missions, which is basically prep for the final showdown against Choo Choo Charles. And there are also technically optional weapon missions where you go around the island and acquire these various types of weapons. Like you've got a rocket launcher, you've got this big double-barreled anti-aircraft type gun, a flamethrower, and then the one you start with, of course, is just the run-of-the-mill machine gun. The whole thing with this game is it's all about scrap. You use scrap to upgrade your damage, you use scrap to upgrade your shields, you use scrap to upgrade the train's speed, and you also use scrap to repair the train after a fight with Charles, because you'll encounter him randomly, or what I believe is randomly, on the island. He never seems to be triggered by any sort of specific event or anything like that. There's no one area that he goes to more often than not. Since you're on a track, the track goes around, like there's the main coastal line for the track, and then there are a bunch of interweaving tracks that go through the island. And there are these switching stations. Basically, you just get out of the train, pull the switch, hop back in the train, and then it'll go. It indicates it indicates what direction you're going to go, depending on what light is illuminated, left or right. And so you kind of have to plot out your trek. You don't really have to plot it out in the beginning. It's seeing as you have the ability to just hop out of the train and switch it on the fly. But you're not going to want to do that if you're engaged in a fight with Charles, obviously, because he'll just completely ruin you. So when you're a little bit into the game, you start to remember which way you left certain intersections, certain junctions facing. So you can kind of be like, okay, well, I'm just going to go full speed ahead then with my map open, because I know that in order to get to this side quest I marked for myself, the next two junctions are switched in the direction I need, which is kind of cool. It's kind of emergent gameplay, I'd say. Like, they never urge you to do that. They never urge you, like, say, hey, remember which ones you switched. You just kind of start doing it automatically, which I thought was pretty cool. Toward the beginning, it feels a little bit mobile gamey. And what I mean by that is scrap is literally everything. You get scrap from the side missions. Scrap is the only thing you'll find out in the open world. And the only place you can use it is your train to beef it up or repair it or whatever. It feels like I almost wouldn't have been surprised if there was a menu where you could pay $1 for 50 scrap or something like that. You know, after it goes on for a little bit, that feeling kind of goes away. You start finding out that the world isn't as bland as it seems to be right off the bat. And the thing that keeps it going, keeps it interesting, would be hands down are the side missions, because that's where you get to interact with the very few NPCs on the island. And they're all fairly quirky. They've all got voiced dialogue, which is cool. Some are more quirky than others. Like, one of them actually had me laughing out loud, and I don't want to spoil it because it's just fun to experience. And more than likely, this NPC will be the first person you actually interact with on the island, aside from the guy who takes you to the island in the first place in the boat. So you'll get that quirky taste pretty early on. The side missions are a lot of the time, almost like a mini game type situation. Something that switches up the mechanics a little bit, and by mechanics I don't mean like suddenly you're using different controls or you're driving a tank now or something like that. It's nothing ever that big. One is finding fuses to bring back, and that's really easy. You just go to the shed and you pick up all the fuses to bring back to this person who was injured by Charles and couldn't do it themselves. And then once the fuses are in, you have a little kind of Resident Evil style switch puzzle. You know, the kind where you've got 5 switches and you flick one and then you flick the next one and they all reset, so you have to figure out the right way to do it. There's another one that's kind of like, oh, what's that game? Grandma's Footsteps, where you're not supposed to move if something's looking at you. It's similar to that. One thing that I thought was really interesting, pretty early on, I decided to go out into, like, I parked the train, and it was super early on. I think I only activated one side mission, and it was that first side mission for the quirky NPC I was telling you about. And the game's really good at kind of showing you where you might want to go with these path lights. They're kind of like street lights, but there's no actual roads, so it's just these walking paths. And I saw one, and I saw something under it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna explore. This is an open world game, so I'm going to explore. And I went to the street light. Then there were some more street lights leading down into this kind of mini valley deal with a lot of interlocking paths within the valley. And suddenly this notification pops up, or this HUD element pops up that says like pages 0 out of 8 or something like that. And immediately, of course, 8 pages, Slender. You're thinking of Slender. So it was a little reference, and I thought that was so cool. I was like, this is awesome. There are hidden things to do out here in the open world that aren't just missions marked on the map. That's great. And so it was kind of like a Slender deal. The more pages you get, the more aggressive this thing gets toward you. And it's not quite like Slender. You actually kind of have to juke and dodge it a little bit. You got to get your movements and your timing right. And it was entertaining. It was a break from chugging along the tracks and trying to figure out, the blue missions are the ones I'm supposed to do to further the game. So let me do some side missions first and all that. So I was doing this pages mission, and I collected all the pages, and then it popped up at me that says, okay, now return the pages to X person. And immediately I kind of sunk a little bit, because on the map you see now that one of the side quests that I never activated, I hadn't even gone to that area yet, was now ready to turn in. So it wasn't that there are things to find while exploring. It was just luck that I found one of, I think, probably actually the only side quest that you can activate before you've actually met the quest giver. You know what? Actually, I think technically you could theoretically do 1 or 2 other ones without actually speaking to the person, but that was kind of a bummer for me. I got so excited when I just walked out into the open world and found something seconds later, or, well, maybe not seconds. You know what I mean. Very, very quickly after striking off on my own, away from the train, away from the structured gameplay, I found something that I thought was really cool, and I thought it was just, I wouldn't have found it if I was just sticking to the normal things, but it turns out, yeah, it's just a side quest that I accidentally did before activating. Now, I would say the biggest gripe I have with Choo Choo Charles is the fact that there are 3 areas that you have to go to get 3 things, keeping it spoiler free, in order to kick off the end game fight with Charles. And each of these areas are GD non-combat stealth encounters in really tight areas The second I loaded into the game, literally the second I did, I'm walking and I'm pushing all the buttons just to see what's jump, if there's a crouch. And the shoulder buttons both do this lean thing. And so I already knew right when I started that, oh crap, I'm gonna have to stealth around something. And indeed, you do. There are 3 mandatory stealth areas. But the thing that irks me about it is that there are damage-doing weapons on the train. You fight Charles, but also, if you encounter the kind of cultists that worship Charles around the island, you can shoot them too. There are ballistic physics. It's in the game. And I remember this one area where I unlocked a room, and I think it was like a paint can or something. There are collectible paint cans that you can get to customize your train. And I opened this one room, and there were these 2 really well-rendered double-barrel shotguns on the table. And I swear it looked like I could just walk up to them and pick them up. And I couldn't. And that was before I'd done any of the mandatory stealth missions, before I found out that was like how that was gonna work. And just seeing these shotguns there, I really thought, oh, maybe, just maybe, because they're also the double-barreled shotguns that the cultists all have. But no, unfortunately, you cannot have any offensive armaments aside from when you are on the train. And it's truly ridiculous, because when I would mess up one of these stealth areas, because there are other stealth areas that are more or less optional, like there are cultists just around in the open world. And when you get seen, your only recourse is to run back to the train, and you really have to get back to the train. You can't lose them. They will be on your ass forever until you either get back to the train and use the weapons to shoot them, or until you just leave on the train, or they kill you. So I would find that those stealth segments, there's never a whole lot of enemies. I think the maximum number of enemies I ever saw in one of the mandatory stealth areas was 2. So I would just run through, waving my arms, whooping like a maniac, and then just remember how I got into the area and sprint these 2 guys all the way back to the train, and then shoot them in the face, and then go back in unmolested to get my story MacGuffins. And like I said, the firearm physics are already in there. How hard would it have been to just give you a shotgun with 2 rounds in it that you could tote around for getting out of trouble quick if you needed to? The streamer bait games, the games that are all about running and hiding and sanity meters and all that stuff, it's just, line of sight. If it sees you, it makes a beeline for you. Maybe you can lose it by some mechanic, but you cannot fight it, because that's harder to program than just plastering "you are dead" on a red screen once the thing gets close enough to you. So the fact that the ballistic physics are actually in the game and they didn't use it, because it's not like they don't want you to kill people. You're just here to kill Charles, player. You're not here to kill people. You can kill the people. You can flamethrow their ass from the train. Very, very strange choice not to include that. Another disappointing thing would be the fact that the developer basically came right out and said, "This is the game. There won't be DLC." So I beat Choo Choo Charles in 3.5 hours, 3.6 hours to be exact. And I bought it for $20, which is pretty steep for just over 3.5 hours of playtime. That was before I saw that the developer had said they weren't planning on DLC. If they could just keep this island and, create a new weapon or 2 and a new type of enemy to hunt, maybe add those offensive capabilities during the stealth sections where it's not like the best way to go, but it is an option other than running for minutes, entire minutes, to get back to your train and shoot these completely persistent dudes that are chasing you out of your mission area. So a little disappointing. little bit disappointing. And I think one of the I already talked about the first disappointment, which was that there aren't things off the beaten path to find that you won't just be pointed right to with side missions. But the final thing I want to talk about, there is this additional mission. There are 4, I believe, mission critical quests, color-coded in blue. 3 of them are collecting the 3 MacGuffins you need to kick off the final fight, and then 1 is putting explosives on a bridge. And the way the NPC worded it is that if Charles crosses the bridge, they can detonate it under him. And, you know, I was pretty sure about how the final fight was going to go. It was going to be one long drive in the train. You weren't going to be able to get out to switch rail directions. And you better hope you have enough scraps stockpiled to repair, because Charles is going to damage you as you go. He's going to be bigger and badder than ever. Previously in the game, you know, you damage him a certain amount and he flees. So the end game was going to be a fight to the death, and he damages you pretty thoroughly. So, and you're very physical. You're not just like going into a menu real quick and swapping weapons. You're on the weapon, and then if you want to switch to the flamethrower, you get off the weapon, run into the train, grab the flamethrower, and then run back out and use it. And you have to also go to the blueprint thing on the table inside the train, which is where you will repair and upgrade and do all that stuff. So it's a lot of balls to keep in the air. And you will not be able to get off the train, obviously, because Charles will just cream you like corn. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make it my mission to see that bridge in action. So I would say I spent probably a good 20 minutes right before I went and activated the MacGuffin. I made sure that where I was going to park my train, as soon as I started it, it was going to take me up, and you know, all the tracks were switched in the right place to take me up to the bridge and lead him over it. And then, just in case something didn't work, or maybe he goes around it or something, get me into a smaller loop, including that bridge. And I was really excited about this plan. I was like, this is cool. Talk about emergent gameplay. You could just go at him old school and you know, shoot him with everything you got and use scrap to repair and do all that, or you could do a big chunk of damage with this bridge trap that you laid. And I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but that bridge ends up being in a scripted sequence of events. So I would have almost beat the game a half hour earlier if I would have just not given a crap and gone straight to the MacGuffins and set off the final fight and just did it like that. That was by far the biggest disappointment, when they made it seem like that bridge was an option you could, you know, use your brain power to effectively add it in to your strategy. And then it's a scripted thing that happens at a certain point, no matter what. That was a real bummer. I'd say the biggest takeaway from all the negatives I've said is I didn't appreciate the brief illusion of choice that was given to me several times, and then immediately shown that it was fate all along, basically. Also this week, I got on Steam and played a game that's been on my wish list for a long time, and I finally got around to playing it. Fossilfuel. And I'm not exaggerating or engaging in hyperbole when I say the face of this game and the kind of it's clearly Half-Life meets Dino Crisis, which is just a recipe for amazement. And so it's first person, it's in this underground lab facility that's bringing back extinct animals. And I'd say for the first hour of it, that Half-Life Dino Crisis feel to it, the the documents that kind of indicate that, hey, so once you get to this area, this is a very specific example early in the game, so I'm not too worried about it being a spoiler for anybody. But you go into this office, and there's a locked box. And there's a note that's from the owner of the office, or the occupant of the office, saying that they're going to fix a certain thing in a certain area, and that's it. And so immediately, you know, I'm a big survival horror fan, Resident Evil specifically. I read that and I was like, okay, so this area, I need to be on the lookout for a corpse somewhere, probably off the beaten path, that's going to have a key to open this box, and then I need to do a big backtrack to get here. And that was exactly what happened. I found a corpse in the vicinity of what the document said he was going to be working on. He had a key. Once I did the objective and was able to loop back around, I went back into that office and Magnum revolver. Resident Evil / Dino Crisis, you know, survival horror basically. And in the first hour of the game, all the enemies are prehistoric creatures that have been brought back a la Jurassic Park in this underground facility, and of course something goes terribly wrong, and now you've got Utah raptors stalking the halls, and the Utah raptors mess you up fast, really fast. The first bit, you know, you don't have a weapon, it's kind of a stealth thing, but I didn't really mind it because it was dinosaurs, and I'm just a total slut for dinosaurs. So it was kind of this alien isolation thing where you're sneaking around the beginning area of the facility, you're trying to get around this Utah raptor, and then you get through, you solve a very, very simple puzzle, and then you get your first weapon, a handgun, as always. And then if you dawdle, the raptor will actually patrol to where you are. Like, I was searching drawers, and suddenly there was this big crash, and it had broken a door and was just on the other side of this wooden door with a window, and it came flying in. And I mean, I got maybe 2 shots off, and it killed me, and I was shocked. But I was also pretty excited because I was like, okay, so this isn't going to be just some first-person shooter where you shoot dinosaurs as, you know, cannon fodder. Like, one of these enemies can mess you up. And that's always a key tenet in horror games, or survival horror games specifically. Like, one enemy should pose a threat, especially near the beginning. Anyway, I played for a little bit more, and there were raptors, there are other dinosaurs, there are other prehistoric animals. I don't want to spoil them because they were pretty cool to see. And then you get to the Half-Life portion, where the whole thing that went wrong, now you've got these special forces, these unscrupulous special forces guys infiltrating the base. And it turns out they were actually the ones that caused this whole accident and let all the dinosaurs animals out. And they, of course, they're from, like, they're Russian Spetsnaz or something, and they want the research for themselves because, you know, how invaluable is it to have a freaking dinosaur? I don't know. It's actually, once all this started happening, the first issue with the game became very, very clear. There are no subtitles. No options for subtitles. And the voice acting, I'm sorry, not the acting, the mixing, the voice mixing into the rest of the audio is dreadfully low. I think I maybe caught 2 full exchanges, and they were both from the same guy. Because I flat out couldn't hear what was being said over what else was going on. In fact, there was this one great part where you've been shooting soldiers in the face for about a half hour, and then you come across this room with these 3 guys, and like all the other soldiers, one of them comes sprinting at you, because that's how the soldiers in the AI in the game for the soldiers isn't super great. It works for the animals, because the animals are animals. If they want to eat you, they're gonna run straight at you. That's what an animal would do. But the people basically activate their ranged attack, their guns, at a certain distance from you, depending on what type of gun they have. But before then, they just run straight to you. And there's actually some really funny stuff that happens because of that later on I'll get to. But this guy just started heading right towards me, running straight towards me, and I was like, and I shot him in the face. And then I shot the next guy in the face. Then I opened the door, I could see another guy through the window, and I shot him in the face. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I went about my business, and I ended up dying from this wave of dinosaurs that comes down the hallways. Kind of amusing. And so I restarted. And I ended up dying a couple times. And the last time, right before I shot the first guy in the face, I heard like a hint of maybe some voice acting. And so I restarted the checkpoint and I walked back in. And the man literally says, "Don't shoot, friendlies." And I've been shooting him in the face for like 3 tries now because I didn't hear it at all, and there's no subtitles, and there's no option for subtitles, and it's just ridiculous. The game has some pretty simple, but, decent puzzles. Most of it is, find thing to go in thing, or fight your way through a certain area in order to flip a switch, which will then let you go into the next area. It's pretty basic fare. But once the soldiers came onto the scene, this game that was, it's pretty polished. It's a very good looking game. It's a beautiful game. The dinosaur models, the environment, the lighting, it's really pretty. And as soon as the soldiers come in, it turns into one of the jankiest things I've played in a long time. Probably the jankiest thing I've ever played that looked this good. Perfect example is the shield-bearing soldiers. So when these dudes are introduced, I think there's like 6 or 8 of them that all come in. They come in pairs from 2 different directions. So 2 come in from here and 2 come in from here. But the thing is, like I said, they have that dinosaur AI right up until they reach a certain distance from you. And only then do they raise the shield. While they're running, the shield's kind of down to their side. So I've got this rifle, and I've just got these shield idiots running straight at me in a conga line, and I'm boop, headshot, boop, headshot, boop, headshot, like all 6 or all 8 of them. And then they throw in the armored guys, and the armored guys will F you up. They've got the same AI, but they take, I would say, an immensely unrealistic amount of damage. Like, even for a video game, armored guys, you're supposed to get around them and shoot them in the butt. That's not how this works, because it's a little like the guys from Choo Choo Charles. Once they see you, they're on you. You can't lose them. And in this sequence, you walk into the room detected. Like, they know you are there the second you walk into the door. It's scripted. And so even with the biggest guns, I couldn't put them down fast enough. They would come up to me and they would just flatten me as soon as they got within firing range. So I crafted a bunch of grenades, and I used the grenades, and they're in this catwalk kind of thing, this covered catwalk. And when the dinosaurs and the soldiers die, they ragdoll. But when they're alive, they stay completely rigid in their model, like in the confines of what their living model is supposed to be. But they will be moved, I guess is the best way to say it. So I started throwing grenades just one after the other, because I had no idea how many it was going to take to kill the armored guy. And I had a dozen, I think, so I was like, I'm just going to throw 6, and I'll count and see which explosion he dies on, and if I've thrown too many, whatever, I've got plenty for the second one. And they're landing at his feet, and he's just popping in the air, legs still moving, like he's running, but he's hitting the ceiling of the catwalk. So he's just pinballing around with these grenades. Ba-ding, 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 ba-ding. It was the funniest fucking thing I've ever seen. Well, not ever seen, obviously, but it's the funniest thing I can think of right now. So the combat with the people is just real freaking goofy. I was forgiving it with the dinosaurs because, like I said, I love dinosaurs. Dinosaurs in video games, there's not enough of them. But once you get past the initial first areas that are just ridden with dinosaurs, it's mostly about the people at that point. It's mostly about the soldier combat encounters. And it does switch it up for you. There are some slightly different enemy types that aren't just flesh and blood dudes. They're still ranged attack units, but there's I don't want to spoil it just in case you do want to play this game. And I would say it's still worth playing. I did have a good time with it. it was just kind of more at the game's expense, some of it, than actually being like, oh man, this is awesome. And there are multiple endings, specifically 2, and they're based on a choice, a just completely binary choice, where one is clearly the better thing to do, and the other thing is a really damn stupid thing to do. So of course luckily there's multiple save slots, so I saved in a different slot right before the choice, and I did the good thing. And it basically, you've got a short walk and then right to your final boss fight, which was a little anticlimactic in my opinion. The boss fight, like all the soldier sections, it was janky as hell, and it just went down really weird, I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to show footage of it because I don't want to spoil it. And so after I beat the game, of course, I went back and did the dumb thing to do. And you immediately find out that it was a dreadfully dumb thing to do. And then I went to that game's end boss, which I actually thought was a lot cooler. I was like, this is a much better boss fight than the good endings boss fight. It's not very diverse. It's you know what? I'm gonna put a spoiler warning right here for the bad ending boss fight. Skip to the timestamp you see above or over whatever if you want to avoid the spoiler for the bad endings boss fight. So basically, it's a T-Rex at the end of a train tunnel. And you have however long it takes its slow ass to walk back to the train. And there's an explosive barrel, and at this point you should have a decent amount of weapons. But the thing is, even with a decent amount of weapons, even with a bunch of explosives, I didn't have enough damage output to actually kill it within the time frame. Even just backing up and memorizing when to jump to get up onto the obstacles that you have to bypass. It has so much health, no combination of weapons was able to kill it. I couldn't finish it. And I thought that was really goofy. And I was like, maybe I should just drop the difficulty down to easy real quick and see if that makes a difference, just so I can get the ending. And I found myself just being like, no, I don't care that much. So anyway, end of spoiler for bad ending boss fight. It was okay. I can't remember exactly how long it took me to play. I'll look it up real quick. 4.5 hours. It says I played it for 4.5 hours. And if I recall, Fossilfuel was actually cheaper than Choo Choo Charles was. I bought it on sale at the time. At the moment, it's $20, but I bought it on some kind of sale during the Halloween period, I think. But anyway, that's what I played. That's my show. I've been watching a bunch of movies, but none that I really want to go into right now because they are Blumhouse Productions movies that I've been catching up on. There were a few from 2022 that I never got around to watching, and then there are a few from way back in, over the last decade that I just missed, didn't know was Blumhouse or whatever. Blumhouse is my favorite production company. And my plan is I'm going to get on with a buddy and we're going to do a tier list. There are 90 Blumhouse Productions movies, and I've made a tier list for them, and we're going to go through them and kind of give it the S, A, B, C, D ratings for each one. So I'm really excited about that, and I don't want to talk about any of the newer ones I've seen until then. I want to save it for the tier list video. So yeah, I've been Smokey Lyle. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.